Yo, what's up? This is Jay Dennis, and we're back with another Ranked and Reviewed. And today, we're going to be doing one of my favorite bands from high school. And just like a lot of these other bands that I've done, kind of on again, off again, listening to them. Kind of missed some of their more recent albums up until now. But I was planning on doing this band anyway, but then the untimely and sad death of frontman, legendary guitarist Alexi Laiho kind of inspired me to want to do this sooner. So rather than framing this as just scrutinizing an awesome legacy that he's left behind with 10 solid studio albums, let's just kind of look at it as what are my favorite albums, of course, and why are some albums even more amazing than others. Because again, I don't typically rank and review albums unless either all or the majority of an artist's work is awesome. Maybe one of these days I'll do a band that's a little bit more polarizing and stuff like that, but a lot of these bands that I've done, especially Children of Bodom, they have a consistent and powerful and ever slightly evolving, more progressively getting better body of work. But like I mentioned, I've been listening to this band mostly in high school, so mid to late 2000s. I got into them during the golden age of metalcore, when I was getting into other bands like Killswitch, Trivium, As I Lay Dying. But I got into Children of Bodom around the same time I got into other melodic death metal bands like Arch Enemy. I got into them around the same time. So when I was getting into those more extreme vocals, Children of Bodom and their melodic death metal, kind of power metal, and slightly metalcore sound definitely appealed to me. So there's definitely going to be some bias with regards to the albums that were relevant at the time, but after having gone back and re-listened to their entire body of work, it aged really well. Their most recent albums are also fantastic, and I'm excited to go through these 10. So again, like I said, there will be a bit of a bias because there's a bit of nostalgia value for this band, but I'm excited to also talk about their more recent albums. Again, Alexi Laiho is one of the absolute best guitarists, one of my favorite guitarists that I ever grew up listening to. He was only 12 years older than I am, so writing incredible music from such a young age definitely inspired me to want to be a better guitar player, a more solid rhythm player. And his untimely death is just devastating. I guess he had some late health issues that just finally overtook him. So it's definitely a devastating blow to the metal community at large. And he will be missed, and his work will forever inspire many guitar players to come. And he still inspires me to this day to want to play better. He's got, from early on and even into some of the more recent work, there were definitely some neoclassical elements to help complement the power metal aspect that eventually evolved into more death metal, metalcore sounds. But there's a bit of variety and, of course, a lot of consistency in this body of work. And I'm going to go into more details as I go through each album. So without further ado, from, I believe, 1997 up until their last release in 2019, let's review and rank Children of Bodom's 10 major studio albums. And be sure to subscribe to the channel, and then by the end of this, you can check the timestamps and whatever if you just want to see what the ranking is at the end. I'll also be doing my top 10 Children of Bodom songs, and be sure to leave a comment on what you agree or disagree with, or what songs resonated with you, or if you have any memories. I like to kind of engage with some of my subscribers and see what we like, or maybe something I missed, an insight about a certain album. So let's get started. And I did look at Alexi's own personal ranking of his 10 albums, and I checked a couple of other for reference too. So there'll be some things that we probably have some common ground on, the metal community at large, but there's also, just like some of my other rankings, going to be some rankings that might be a little surprising. So at the number 10 spot, we have their 2011 release, Relentless, Reckless, Forever. This is kind of an album that I've noticed that a lot of people, including myself, put towards the bottom. The spread between the top and the bottom album are a solid 8 out of 10, all the way up to like a low 9, like a 9.2 or something. So there's going to be a couple of ties here, but Relentless Reckless Forever is kind of easily at the bottom. It's not even close. It's got, and I'm doing standard edition albums, no cover songs, no special editions. 9 tracks. Half of them are great songs. Shovel Knockout is a really catchy, fun song. And then the last track, North Pole Throwdown, is awesome. It's catchy, it's rhythmic, it's fast. And then Not My Funeral is a pretty good opening track, and so is Round Trip to Hell and Back. So the first 3 tracks are pretty solid, but then the middle of the album gets kind of dips a little bit, like where it's not great Children of Bodom material, but it's still good and it's still listenable. The song Ugly is pretty good too. But songs like Was It Worth It, which I'm not talking about like moments, I'm just talking about the song as a whole. Songs like Was It Worth It or the title track Reckless and Forever, they're just kind of flat. Like Children of Bodom is a very fast and dynamic and powerful band with a lot of powerful lead work, a lot of great keyboard work, and this album just kind of suffers from having a stripped down sound, which I believe was kind of a producer move where they kind of just wanted to simplify. There's nothing wrong with a band trying to slow down and simplify. Sometimes that works to their benefit, especially if they have a solid work behind them, but this one just wasn't executed very consistently. It's still a good enough album to listen to from start to finish, but this is definitely an album where I would take maybe 2 or 3 of the tracks, like Shovel Knockout and North Pole Throwdown, and say, these are the good songs off the album. The rest of it I can kind of take it or leave it. So at the bottom spot, Relentless Reckless Forever. And just as a tiny aside, it came out in 2011 during a kind of a difficult part in my life, so it's not exactly anchored in great memories or bad memories either, but it's just, there's just certain albums that came out in 2011 that just didn't resonate well, and to this day are still not the best. So last thought is, some of the songs kind of sound like a mix of like Blood Drunk or Are You Dead Yet B-sides. So it's not their best work, but there's still a few songs in here worth listening to. All their albums are worth listening to. It's Children of fucking Bodom. At the number 9 spot, we have their 2015 release, I Worship Chaos, which might kind of come as a surprise because it's actually a pretty solid album. Songs like Morrigan, Hold Your Tongue are really great tracks. It opens on a good note with I Hurt, and track 2, My Bodom Something. I kind of shortened the titles here. But this is just a little bit of a slower album. What they did differently here was they introduced the drop B tuning, so it's got a little bit more of an evil sound. It's kind of, some of the sounds are a little bit reminiscent of like a slower Are You Dead Yet? So when they slow down for tracks like All for Nothing, it's executed well enough to where you can appreciate like the guitar and keyboard back and forth. But when you're used to kind of like high octane lead work and speed, it just feels like this album is just a little jarring. If you had never heard any other Children of Bodom album, it would definitely be enjoyable. It's still a great album, but it kind of closes on a slow note with All for Nothing, aside from the lead work in the middle, and then of course Widdershins, which is kind of just a decent song. But there are some solid tracks on here. The first 5 tracks are great. Hold Your Tongue is the best song on the album in my opinion, but it's just slower. It's the first album without Roop, so the guitars take a little bit of a hit, even though Alexi Laiho is kind of the predominant guitar player in the band. Roop definitely added something in the last, all the way back to Are You Dead Yet? So this album does kind of have a little bit of a lack of hooks, which is important to me. It's got a very straightforward sound, and the dynamics are pretty straightforward too, so not a lot of catchiness going on, but it is still a better album. It's much more enjoyable than Relentless Reckless Forever, but with regard to everything else Children of Bodom has to offer, this is kind of towards the bottom. So at the number 9 spot, we have I Worship Chaos, with the top tracks being Morrigan and Hold Your Tongue. The drop B sound is pretty cool. Excuse me. At the number 8 spot, we have their first release, Something Wild, which this album has actually aged really well compared to when I listened to it back then. I got a little bit more of a mature ear now, so I definitely respect the guitar work. Alexi Laiho's vocals were still pretty good even back then. He's got pretty consistent vocals throughout the entirety of his career. There's not really a whole lot of variation, but what he does well. So Something Wild, an album that he put out when he was like 17 or 18, really influenced by Yngwie Malmsteen, one of the best guitar players of all time, really rubbed off on Alexi here. So it's a very technical album with some catchiness going on to it. It's pretty impressive and ahead of its time. It's just shorter. It's in the key of C sharp minor, which kind of gives it that epic sound. And again, it's a little bit of a grower of an album, but it opens up with Dead Night Warrior, which is a solid track. The album kind of gets progressively better as you listen to it, but it kind of peaks in the middle with The Red Light in My Eyes Part 1 and Part 2. Great guitar work, but it's very raw, and they were just getting started. But I would have probably ranked this album higher just considering how powerful it was as a first release, but they just got so much better over time, so it's a little easy for me to kind of put this one at the number 8 spot. But 8, 7, and 6 are all kind of a three-way tie, but I'm going to give the slightest disadvantage to Something Wild, 1997. Best tracks are Red Light in My Eyes Part 2, which is a little bit more rhythmic and more low end than Part 1, and I like that. And then The Nail, I really like that track too. But these Bodom albums typically don't have what I would deem excellent songs, or like 9 out of 10 songs. It's a lot of 8s, a lot of mid 8s or low 8s here. So at the number 8 spot, we have their first release, Something Wild. It is Something Wild. It's a great album. Give it a listen. But better is definitely to come. All right, and at the number 7 spot, again, part of a three-way tie here, given the slight advantage to the follow-up album, Hatebreeder from 1999. Their first couple of albums were very much more neoclassical, so for your more old-school metal fans, this opinion's probably not going to resonate very well with you, but just like with In Flames, or maybe even Slayer, stick around. You might find that I actually do appreciate the classics. But anyway, Hatebreeder is another album that kind of aged well. I know this is kind of like a lot of Children of Bodom purists' favorite albums, but it really comes down to preference. If you're more into the power metal, neoclassical side of things, this is probably going to be one of your favorite albums. It is very consistent. A lot of great tracks on here. The title track, Hatebreeder, Bed of Razors, has always been my favorite song. Still is. Downfall, great closing track. So I would call this album kind of like the perfect median between what Something Wild was and what Follow the Reaper would be. It's like a more raw version of Follow the Reaper, but it's a more refined version with half a step up compared to what Something Wild was. So the vocals are a little bit more raw still, but the dynamics of Hatebreeder are more solid, and again, it's got that thrashy neoclassical sound. So got a tiny bit of nostalgia and memories attached to this one. I did listen to this album back in high school. You know, songs like Silent Night, Bodom Night, still sit with me. That intro bass to Warheart is still a pretty, solid, positive trigger for me. But to this day, the best tracks are Hatebreeder and Bed of Razors, and of course, Downfall is pretty huge. But everything else, Toward Dead End has a solid last minute, but the other tracks are just kind of great, but not their best, in my opinion. So that's the number 7 spot to 1999's Hatebreeder. Next up, at the number 6 spot, we have their 2013 release, Halo of Blood. Now, originally, I had this one at the number 8 spot, but upon additional listens, this album really grew on me. This far in, for them to really make a solid comeback album, after what some people would deem as them having a few dips in the late 2000s and with Relentless Reckless Forever, Halo Blood was a jarring and good return to form for them. It's definitely their most return to form album, and it got better and better. For them to put out this solid of an album this far in allowed me to say that with regard to the three-way tie, this one is towards the top of that, comfortably at the number 6 spot. Halo of Blood gets a solid 8.43 out of 10. The lead work is phenomenal. The dynamics between how catchy the guitar work is, along with the vocals and just everything in between. It does it really well. Like I said, it's even better on consecutive listens. It's just a very overall solid and balanced album. You got kind of everything in this album that Children of Bodom does throughout the past and in the present. The guitar work is intense, but it's fluid. It's not like overpowering. The only thing that this album suffers from is it's lacking vocal hooks. Like, there's not songs with like lyrics that really stay with you or hooks that really stay with you, and that's really important to me. I may be a metalhead and I may like extreme music, but I'm a rhythmic guy, and as much as I love leads and I love playing them, I'm a rhythm and a groove guy at heart, and I need more hooks vocally. I like that shit. Best tracks on this album are Bodom Blue Moon and All Twisted. All Twisted sounds like a fucking Are You Dead Yet track, which I love. But overall, it's a solid album. Mostly high ratings here. And the first couple of tracks really kick the album off well, and it ends on a great note too, so it's got a solid bookend effect. So Halo of Blood, if you're looking for a more modern Children of Bodom album, that's like a return to form. For some people, to me, I don't think they ever dropped off, but we're all different. Halo of Blood would be your album to kind of restore your faith in Children of Bodom if you've ever lost any. At the number 5 spot, we have their most recent release, their last release, Hext, 2019. So Hext is a lot like Halo of Blood, where it's a very balanced and solid album, and obviously this is going to be the last studio album that Children of Bodom ever puts out. So all I have to say about Hext is the only reason why this album doesn't score any higher and why it's not at the very top is because I didn't listen to this album in high school. The other albums that are ahead are much more nostalgia and memory and more hooks, but Hext is definitely their best recent album. It is an excellent legacy album for Children of Bodom because they have pretty much every sound that made them who they were over the years in this album. It's not a concept album. It is a perfect mix of their old school neoclassical sound, power metal sound, perfect mix of the 2000s more rhythm thrashy, low end catchy sound, and then whatever they accomplished in the 2010s by bringing it all together and really solidifying their sound and showing what powerful musicians they became over the years. It's really shown in the Hext album. What's kind of dark about this album, though, is you might realize that the lyrical themes and the title of the track, Hext, really might indicate that Alexi Laiho knew that he was going to pass away because he was like terminally ill. So there's kind of a darkness behind this album, but it just kind of shows how powerful music can be and how powerful of an expression it can be. I might be speculating here on the themes, but Under Grass and Clover, it's kind of, it might be a sign. Best tracks on this album are Kickin' a Spleen and Hext. Hext has a beautiful outro with the bass and the keyboards. I love it. But Hext is just a slightly better version of Halo of Blood with some slightly better top tracks. Again, another reason why it's a legacy album is because they have a pretty fluid mix of guitar tunings. They pretty much play in all the tunings they've ever played in on this album, from drop B to C sharp standard to drop C to I think even D standard. So if Children of Bodom was looking to combine all the best parts of all their past albums and put it into an album, it would be Hext. So again, the only reason why it doesn't really score much higher is because it doesn't have the same nostalgia and sentimental value, but it is an excellent close to an otherwise powerful legacy. So if you haven't listened to Hext yet, you are sleeping on it. Next up, we kind of have a two-way tie, but obviously I know which one to give the advantage to, so I will say at the number 4 spot, which might confuse some people because this isn't generally one of their more popular albums, but it is for me. At the number 4 spot, we have their 2008 release, Blood Drunk. I listened to this album when it came out. My buddy who got me into this band, one of my close friends in high school, we would, drive together to school every day. biggest Children of Bodom fan I knew. He actually had an Alexi Laiho signature guitar. Yeah, my buddy had a Alexi Laiho signature guitar, and huge Bodom fan, got me into them, got me pretty much all their albums that had come up to that point. And we listened to Blood Drunk together quite a bit, and that was an album that I listened to quite a bit during the summer of 2008 when it had come out, or when it was relatively new, and that was one of the best summers I ever had. So Blood Drunk is a solid anchor of positive memories for me. They got more thrashy, they got more metalcore, and the sound was oddly even more crunchy, but there's a charm to this album. The speed and the execution of a lot of the hooks are what really elevate this album towards the top. Songs like One Day You Will Cry really highlight the sound of like golden age metalcore music, but then you tie in the melodic death metal aspects that Children of Bodom has. But this is just a very consistent and solid album, not a single weak track that dips below an 8.5. It opens and closes on a powerful note. Top tracks are One Day You'll Cry, Done With Everything, Die For Nothing, I think's the name, and then the closing track, Roadkill Morning. Some people might ding this album for kind of having generic sounding metalcore riffs, but I don't know. The way Alexi Laiho plays, he just does it so well that he can kind of get away with reusing some riffs because they're still executed really well. And of course there's a lot of hooks in this album, like Tie My Rope, the actual title track, Blood Drunk. But there's just a lot of really solid dynamics between lead guitar work and choruses in tracks like Lobotomy or Smile Pretty for the Devil, and then of course Roadkill Morning. So to me, this is just kind of their most underrated album, is Blood Drunk. You know, they would say, oh, this is kind of where the purists that thought that Are You Dead Yet was where they fell off, and then they continued to fall with Blood Drunk. I disagree. I think they kind of kept that awesome rhythmic sound going, but then they sped it up and kind of made certain aspects more awesome in the late 2000s. So I get why purists would look down on this album, but just as a metalhead, they can kind of appreciate a little bit of everything, but I have my preferences. Blood Drunk has that sentimental value. It's a catchy album. It's solid. It kind of checks off most of the boxes. So that's why it's comfortably at the number 4 spot, getting like a 8.7 out of 10. All right, now for the top 3. Like I said, number 3 is kind of tied with number 4, but I'm giving the slight edge to the number 3 spot. Their Millennium release, Follow the Reaper. This is kind of where I put their more neoclassical power metal style stuff towards the top, because Follow the Reaper is the absolute epitome of perfection with regards to that era. Children of Bodom, they kind of did what Black Dahlia Murder, or maybe Black Dahlia Murder did what Children of Bodom did, where they have like all these different colored albums. But anyway, Follow the Reaper, very much like Blood Drunk, in my opinion, is a super consistent album with like no weak tracks at all. The songs generally range from like an 8.6 to a 9. The best track on the album, to me, is the closing track, Kissing the Shadows. That solo is legendary. My other favorite tracks are Mask of Sanity and Taste of My Scythe, but Follow the Reaper is where Children of Bodom really started to kind of get a little bit more into the hooks, writing catchier material. Like more memorable courses like Bodom After Midnight, Hate Me. But since I was 15 or 16, whenever I got into this band, back in the mid-2000s, a song that always... The thing that always stuck with me about the Follow the Reaper album was how intoxicating the intro guitar melodies were. Songs like Children of Decadence, I've always loved that intro. What's another one? I don't know, I'm blanking out here, but Children of Decadence is a very telling song. It kind of encapsulates the theme of the album, where like the neoclassical elements of the guitar playing the lead work is just really powerful here. They basically gotten even better. This is like a much more refined and catchy version of Hate Breeder. So if you like the more raw stuff, maybe Hate Breeder's your speed, but if you like a little bit more refinement and you still appreciate the classic elements, Follow the Reaper is kind of a perfect album. It's definitely the best album, in my opinion, of that era. It gets a solid 8.7 out of 10 for me. Slightly better than Blood Drunk because it's more ahead of its time. The musicality is better. And I guess just a little bit of course, just respect. One guitar player to another. The guitar work in Follow the Reaper is just unmatched. And now is where we get to the God tier level of Children of Bodom. The top two are also kind of a tie, but I already know which one is going to be the tippy top. And I kind of knew from the beginning what it would be, but it was difficult for sure. We're getting into the two albums now that have, along with Blood Drunk, effectively solidified my high school years of Children of Bodom. So at the number 2 spot, we basically have the album that started it all for me. Golden Age metalcore icon album, in my opinion. 2005's Are You Dead Yet? The title track, Are You Dead Yet? Along with songs like Rose of Sharon from Killswitch Engage, Rain or Pull Harder on the Strings of Your Martyr from Trivium and their Ascendancy album, Dead Eyes See No Future from Arch Enemy, fucking Darkest Nights from As I Lay Dying. The list goes on. But the title track, Are You Dead Yet?, which was one of the first Children of Bodom songs I ever heard, and I heard it when it was fresh, to this day is probably the best Children of Bodom song. With these top albums, we're now getting into territory where pretty much the majority of my favorite Children of Bodom songs come from. Are You Dead Yet is just a blisteringly powerful rhythmic album. But it is by no means stripped down. This album is chock full of hooks, powerful dynamics that just keep you hooked from start to finish. And even the filler tracks are better than some of the best tracks off of their other albums. What do I mean by that? Songs like Bastards of Bodom or Trashed, Lost, and Strung Out are on the same level, if not better, than the best tracks off of their worst album or their second worst album, what have you. But we're really getting into territory here where we're having songs that are in the excellent range. They're like between a 9 and a 10. Are You Dead Yet? If You Want Peace, Prepare for War. In Your Face, We're Not Gonna Fall. Those are all my favorite tracks off of this album, and they're all between a 9 and a 9.5. But just Are You Dead Yet is such a catchy track. It really anchors a lot of powerfully happy memories. They tune down for either the entire or most of the album to drop C for this album, and it opens on a really powerful note with Living Dead beat. The album has just aged tremendously well. To this day, it's like super fluid, super easy to listen to from start to finish. Where this album really shines is a lot of the tracks on this album, like We're Not Gonna Fall, Trashed, Lost, and Strung Out, Bastards of Bodom. They all have these awesome post-intro keyboard / guitar solo style, like leads like da na 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 na. So like there's just like this really fun thrash metal kind of just epic theme to this album. Anybody that thinks that Are You Dead Yet was a step down for them or a step back, like I could not disagree more. This was where Children of Bodom really broke through. Like, yeah, they broke through with their number 1 album that I'm going to mention here shortly, but this was where they really hit like major commercial success. And to metalheads that say, oh, this is where they sold out, like whatever. If you're a more traditional metalhead, that's fine. But objectively speaking, this album does check off all the boxes. And this is kind of where I have a lot of strong opinions. I'm a little less rugged around the edges as I used to be, but my strong opinion as a musician, somebody that writes music, plays guitar, does metal vocals as well, I can tell you that the difficulty and the layer of musicianship definitely exists in this one. It is a simpler, at times slower sound, but slower doesn't always mean easier. So the technicality of this album is still there, but it flows a lot better, and it's a lot catchier. Like I said, top tier hooks. This is one of the best sounding albums. The production is fantastic. The melodies are almost untouched. The low end riffs are among the best in their entire discography. And even if Are You Dead Yet isn't seen maybe as a metalcore album, to me it really is part of the golden age of metalcore, and why it easily sits towards the very top. Are You Dead Yet is one of Children of Bodom's most popular and best albums for a reason. It's got some of their best songs. In Your Face, Are You Dead Yet? The guitar work, the speed, the magnitude, and the solos and songs like If You Want Peace, Prepare for War. And then one of my favorite tracks is We're Not Gonna Fall. Just like the post-chorus, like do 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 do, like just the instrumentals on here, like it's there. Like they're catchy, they're fun. The leads are great, and so is the keyboard work. 0% boring album. It's like their most fun album. But while Are You Dead Yet might sound like it's my favorite album, these ranked and reviews are also partially an objective review where I kind of remove my opinion a little bit and I say, what's objectively their best album though? But for this number one spot, I think not just the metal community at large, but also myself would say that the number one spot easily, kind of easily goes to 2003's Hate Crew Death Roll. This is just, to me, this is like the early 2000s version of Hext, where you're kind of getting all of Children of Bodom's best sounds, but because this was like 16, 17 years ago, it sounds more raw. But to me, Hate Crew Death Roll is the absolute perfect marriage of what their older material was and what their newer material would become. Because you do have the low-end, heavy, drop tune riff styles of songs like Six Pounder, but then you also have some of those neoclassical power metal elements in songs like Triple Corpse, Hammer Blow. But Hate Crew Death Roll does everything that Are You Dead Yet has, but it churns it up. It's a faster album. It's just as catchy, if not even more catchy, but the intensity is there. The guitar work is just unmatched on this album. I know I said that the melodies and the technicality and the catchiness combined on Hate Crew Death Roll is unmatched. There are elements of Are You Dead Yet that are top tier that are unmatched, but with regards to everything combined, Hate Crew Death Roll is just a perfect quintessential Children of Bodom album. Again, it's like a classic version of Hext, but because it's an older album and pretty ahead of its time, it sits at the number one spot comfortably. Songs like Needled 24/7, that's the absolute best opening Children of Bodom song. Every song on here is above an 8.7. So many 9 tracks on this album. Needled 24/7, that chorus is iconic. It's an excellent live song. Six Pounder, the guitar solo has always been one of my all-time favorite guitar solos. It's just such a phenomenal song. Chokehold, Bodom Beach Terror, it doesn't stop. Even when it slows down for Angels Don't Kill, that is awesome, slow, vintage Children of Bodom. The intensity continues with Triple Corpse, Hammer Blow. You're Better Off Dead has that fucking iconic post-chorus. There's just so many catchy guitar. Like if you're jerking off over lead guitar parts, Children of Bodom is your band. Little known fact, my favorite song, not on this album, but one of my favorite Children of Bodom songs is Little Blood Red Riding Hood. It's just such a catchy song, and I love the guitar solo too. Hate Crew Death Row is also a very solid closing track. So the bookend effect is solid for that one. So it's faster, it's more intense, it's thrashier, but it maintains all the technicality, but while adding hooks. The only thing that this prevents this album from being a perfect 10 is it's not Alexi Laiho's top vocal performance. He does better on other albums like Halo of Blood or Are You Dead Yet or Hext. So he's still got a little bit of that raw sound, but it adds to the charm. I don't think I would change this album. And again, it's ahead of its time, and it's the perfect marriage between older albums like Follow the Reaper and then newer material like Are You Dead Yet? So Hey Crew Death Roll by the tiniest margin is their best album, but Are You Dead Yet is an incredibly close second. Those are easily my two favorite Children of Bodom albums since I was a teen. So with that, from worst to best, even though there is no bad Children of Bodom album, we have Relentless, Reckless Forever, I Worship Chaos, Something Wild, Hate Breeder, Halo of Blood, Hext, Blood Drunk, Follow the Reaper, Are You Dead Yet, and Hate Crew Death Roll. And then lastly, what are probably my top 10 Children of Bodom songs. Some of these aren't in any particular order, but the top ones kind of are. We have Kissing the Shadows from Follow the Reaper, Done with Everything, Die for Nothing from Blood Drunk, Kickin' a Spleen from Hext. I really like that song. The closing track from Are You Dead Yet? We're Not Gonna Fall. Lil Blood, Red Riding Hood from Hate Crew Death Roll. A couple more tracks from Are You Dead Yet? In Your Face, If You Want Peace, Prepare for War. Then we have 6-Pounder, Needled 24/7, and then my all-time favorite Children of Bodom song, kind of the one that started it all, Are You Dead Yet? The title track. I fucking love that song. It's catchy, it's iconic, and it hits hard. So thank you guys so much for continuing to watch and listen to these videos. I have very much enjoyed making them. Rest in peace to one of the all-time greatest metal guitarists, excellent songwriter, super talented and ahead of his time. He was way too young. He put out insanely good music. I wanted to make this ranked and reviewed long before he passed away, but now that it's kind of on everybody's radar, I wanted to pay homage and salute his legacy. He's one of my favorite guitar players. He's a great vocalist too, and he will always be known as, from what I know, such a fun guy who put on a hell of a live show. So rest in peace, Alexi Laiho. You will be sorely missed. You left us way too soon, and I hope you shred in heaven and that you're not banned from heaven. All right, guys, subscribe to the channel. Check out the rest of my ranked and reviewed. It's on a playlist. And again, comment what you agree and disagree with. What are your rankings? What are your favorite songs? And I will catch you on the next video. Peace!